From Washington, D.C., this is Middle East Focus with Paul Salem.
Welcome to Middle East Focus. This week we will be looking and analyzing the results of the Iraqi parliamentary elections that happened this past weekend. Surprising results. Prime Minister Abadi maybe was expecting a victory, but he seems to be coming in third. The first list called As-Sa'irun, Marching Towards Reform, led by Mr. Muqtada Sadr and an alliance of secularists and communists and so on. Interesting alliance. Coming in first. The second list called Fatah or Conquest, led by Mr. Hadi al-Amiri, supported by the Popular Mobilization Unit sort of political grouping, backed somewhat by Iran. And coming in third is Prime Minister Abadi with his Nasr or Victory list. And coming in fourth seems to be former Prime Minister Maliki with his list. A lot to talk about and to analyze as to the elections themselves, formation of the next government. Where does this leave Iraq? Very pleased to have with us today Ambassador Lukman Faily. Ambassador Al-Faily was Iraqi ambassador to the U.S. between 2013 and 2016. Also served previously as Iraqi ambassador to Japan, a mathematician and a computer scientist, so he can help us analyze the detailed result. And as I recently learned, a marathon runner. So this is in Iraqi politics, a long story. Mr. Faily, thank you for being with us, Ambassador Faily, today.
Thank you for having me here.
And our good friend and colleague, as usual, Dr. Randa Slim, director of our Conflict Resolution and Track 2 Mediation Program, and also who's worked on mediation in Iraq for many, many years, knows Iraq very well. Randa, thank you for being with us today.
Good to be with you, Paul.
Ambassador Faily, let me start with you. First of all, how do you read the immediate, results? What does it mean? Is it a surprise?
I think by all standards, it's re-emphasized that democracy is the only way forward and the only tool used by the people to manage the state of the affairs. They are surprised with the results in relation to a bit of polarizations of the result. We no longer have one winner take all, which is a good sign. So there is a bit of result. I think the key result is that the Prime Minister expectation, or by him and others, was not met. And that's the key challenge moving forward.
Does that put him out of the running for being Prime Minister, or is that a different process?
No, nobody is out of the running at this moment. The key questions we have moving forward is who can consolidate the enough forces to get at least roughly about 100 from the Shia blocs, roughly about 100, and overall around 200 seats to be in a comfortable position out of 329.
329
so in
total,
that sense, that's a key challenge. So the key challenge, do we move forward with the politics, or do we go back to old games, comfortable games, in which the people have said they are not happy with?
Randa, these 3 or 4 lists, tell us a bit about their... the list led by Muqtada Sadr, an odd alliance maybe between Mr. Sadr himself, who is a hardliner, comes from a clerical family of the Shiite community, Communist Party and other groups. How do you describe the coloring maybe of the 3 or 4 lists?
I think the first list is very much a national list, in my opinion. And we have seen Mr. Al-Sadr strike relationships with Saudi Arabia, while at the same time being very opposed to U.S. forces' presence. Although when you look at the numbers, the Communist Party members who were able to win within that list is much less. Most of the people who won as part of that list, won seats, are members of a Sadr party and not member of the Communist Party. The second list is very much consisting of leaders of the PMF. It's pro-Iran, backed by Iran. And we expect it to be, taking this line. The third list, which is Al-Nasr, the victory list, is Mr. Abadi. He's well known in terms of trying to carry a balancing game, and he had, it was a cross-sectarian list. He had Shia, he had Sunni, and he had Kurds. And then the fourth list is Mr. Al-Maliki, the old state of law coalition. And I think if you look at the vote garnered by Mr. Abadi and Mr. Maliki, if you add them, it become, the number is much higher than what Mr. Al-Sadr list got and what the PMF list got. And so that speaks to the impact of the division inside Dawah and how that has created space for Muqtada al-Sadr to come in with a very loyal base of 1 million plus voters and try to mine that.
So you're saying that the Dawah party list, which is effectively two lists,
Yes.
were the Dawah party united, it would be dominant.
It would have been dominant if it was one list. But because of the division in that list, in that party between Maliki and Abadi, so that created a space for both the PMF and Muqtada al-Sadr to come in.
Can we examine either Ambassador Faily or Dr. Slim? Can we examine, or is it too early, the results in terms of how different communities voted? We haven't talked about the Kurdish vote. How do you see that
Kurdish vote when they
broken down?
The numbers mean they went back to the comfortable position of 2005 and 6 elections, in which the two dominant parties have a big chunk of it. Smaller parties, new reform parties, youth parties have not performed as well as the expectation was. So there is an issue there. And that will create more, I think the results will have more an implosion within the Kurdish politics.
How do you mean?
You will have an immediate issue of the presidency of Iraq, and that would be the first challenge as how speedy this formation of the government would be. What is the current formula for them? A platform in which they have a decision-making process. That's an issue. There has been demonstrations. There have been other signs. None of the other the 4 other parties who participated, or 5 of them, have already said that this is legitimate results, and
they're challenging the process.
The transparency of it. Going back to the Dawah, which is worthy of just talking about that in 1 second. Always the cohesion of Dawah was the key strength they had before. Now, it's not just a normal number games, because the alliance, Victory Alliance, is a collection of alliances, although State of Law is much more cohesive. So here we cannot just add the numbers because we don't know exactly the loyalties will they be. How could they be fragmented or not? So the cohesiveness of Dawah would be the key challenge. They've always projected the Prime Minister because of that. That's the key moving forward. So to me, it's a cohesion of Dawah.
Lukman, I have a question. What do you think is the reason for KDP performing as well as they did? Is it loyalty of Kurds, of their base feeling under threat, feeling under, after what happened after the referendum? Is it the ground game that the political machine that KDP has always had in the KRG? Or is it, a combination of factors?
The result, if it's reflected the same in their local elections, which will happen on the end of September, then we could say, yes, it's more local versus national. But if you view it as of now, I would bet it's more to do that the Kurds wanted to project a unity of a sort in relation to their referendum, that we are still seeking
towards the national scene,
toward those who were moving with the referendum and separatists sort of movement.
Can we tell a bit?
So I think it's more that at this moment, on the assumption that there is no transparency issue. If there's a transparency issue, then we have an issue.
We might have something else.
We have something else, yes.
Well, obviously, it's still early times, but can we tell how particularly the Sunni towns like Mosul and others, which were under ISIS, this is now, the first election since then.
Ex-minister.
How were they allied with different groups?
Ex-minister of Defense Khalid Ubaidi has got significant seat, most of the seats. He's in alliance with the Prime Minister, and so that's one issue. He's an example where he may go with the Prime Minister or may not go with the Prime Minister. He's an example when we talk about the Victory Alliance.
Yeah.
But at this moment, I'm comfortable he will stay with the Prime Minister Abadi if he's involved in the formation of the government. So in that sense, Mosul was different. There is no one force who has the comfort of controlling all. Even the old game of Ayad Allawi, he didn't do as well as he should have expected to do. He was expected to do 30 plus. He's got 20 plus, just over 20 plus. So even him didn't do well. A bit of local politics. We have a lot of miscellaneous in this group. In comparison to
new
before.
figures, new groups.
Local politics, actually. That's another issue. Most of the old faces already have an issue across all within the Shia Sunnis. So in that sense, we have a good new turnout in democracy.
Can you say
there is one key point, which is I think it's worthy of highlighting it, and that is the indeciders who decided not to turn out rather than just turn out and say no. That's the biggest surprise. And that means the middle of the ground politics was compromised as a result of that.
But Luqman, this no vote is very much part of the Abadi base, correct?
That was what he was basing it on.
Yes.
And therefore, but the good news in relation to whether Prime Minister Abadi gets it or not as a second term is that no party will provide a polarized person as a candidate for the premiership.
Yes.
They would want to go for nationalistic, middle of the ground.
Somebody unifying.
So in that sense, sectarianism is no longer the key theme.
You know, the last speech by the representative of Ayatollah Sistani, you know, although it pushed people to go and vote, but at the same time it says, you know, do not vote for the people that are known to...
You're not obliged to vote.
Exactly. You are not obliged to vote for the people. Do you think that has been interpreted by people as, you know, do not go and vote? Or I have heard other Iraqi, analysts saying it has been interpreted by people as go and vote for Sa'irun. What's your interpretation of that?
No, certainly it was not voting for any. I'm equal distant from all. It was disgruntledness with the political class overall, with the government to a certain extent, unfortunately, as well. It was also a sign that I am not wali al-faqih. Don't expect me to be micromanage your direction. And people took it that way. But to be fair as well, it was not the only sign they gave. They've been consistently saying, don't get us involved in this politics. So it was consistently, we are unhappy. If, for example, the Prime Minister or other officials were received by the Grand Ayatollah, then yes, that would not have been. But they have not been, which means that there is a sense of an abandonment in relation to the political class. And Sistani was more or less talking to the people. He's bypassing the politician.
And remember, Paul, that this mood of malaise, this vis-a-vis the political class, vis-a-vis corruption, has been now in existence since 2015. You know, and we have seen protests, you know, civil society-led protests, youth-led protests, and Muqtada Sadr tried to take the leadership of this and co-opt the civil society movement. Partly succeeded, partly did not succeed, and maybe that's also fueled some of the support for Muqtada Sadr. But it will be interesting also to see, we had a large number of first-time voters, and it will be interesting to see how much of that first-time voters, what's the percentage of that first-time voter went to a group like Sa'ir.
Let me ask, going back a bit to the Sunni vote, that obviously, you know, the challenge that the Sunni community under Maliki, the problems there, then you had the ISIS period. Was this election a gateway that they came back into the political process? Of course, nothing's perfect and politicians are politicians, but is there a sense that the Sunnis are making their amends with the political system and came out to vote and are playing politics?
Nobody is saying I need to not to participate in the political process for me to influence. So
no major boycott.
Actually, in one way, you had a 20% decrease in the Shia bloc population. In that sense, yes. So to them, that was the biggest main trend. So we are disgruntled with the politicians. So let's get mixed areas. There was a clear sign that the numbers are okay, but in more dominant areas. In the south, there was an issue. In the Kurdish area, there was better participation in others. In the Sunni area, in proportion to before, yes, it's a good sign. Well, so in one sense, they were saying we need to play our role, but they still don't have enough leadership with enough common vision to bring them together into a clear platform.
So that's the question, because that has always been the problem with what I call the Baghdad-based Sunni leaders. Yes. You know, is that there have been this gap growing between them and their constituencies throughout Iraq, and it's very clear if the elections now, as we are hearing, are correct, that Mr. Salim al-Jabouri might not come back into parliament.
No, I think
he will.
Yes,
he will.
Think so.
So I mean, that's what. You know, early result, but you're right. It might be changed shortly thereafter. But if that's the case, do we see this election producing a new representative cadre of Sunni leaders?
I think the result we saw that, and Al-Hal, for example, didn't do well. The Karbouli brothers didn't do well. Al-Qarar did well. We will see a new type and nobody is now labeling them as Baghdad or government Sunnis. I don't see it that way. But it's too early, and they still don't have enough vision of what do they want the state to be.
Let me,
It's the shell shock of ISIS is still there.
Yes, yes.
Let me ask, I mean, since Mr. Muqtada al-Sadr has come out with some leverage as a result, where do you think he might use this leverage in terms of government formation or backing a prime minister? Where does he want to use this political success, do you think?
Look, he has
Randa or
already, I
Lukman?
mean, I think one of the people, or I think the leader of his list, of his party, already said that they feel more comfortable entering into an alliance with Mr. Abadi than Mr. Amiri. And we also know the history between Mr. Maliki and Mr. Al-Sadr. So I can see that alliance, forming.
So it
and
might
that
favor the prime
It might
minister.
favor the prime minister, but also Mr. Al-Sadr also a few days ago said that he has already 2 candidates in mind for the prime minister job if his list were to score a victory. But again, the margin of victory is not that wide.
Not
Between the
overwhelming,
first, it's
yeah.
not overwhelming. Nobody has 80 plus seats that enable him to that enable them to be in the total driver's seat to nominate the prime minister. They have to enter to the alliance and also watch. It's going to be very important to watch the play of Al-Hikmah, led by Mr. Al-Hakim. Mr. Al-Hakim and Mr. Sadr are very close, in terms of 2 scions of 2 important religious families. They are of the same age. They have become, closer together lately. And so see the play by Mr. Al-Hakim in terms of the kind of being also some
a little bit
kind
of a kingmaker as well.
Not kingmaker, but trying to put these pieces together through his good relationship with all sides, be it Abadi, be it Sadr, or
And we met with Mr. Hakim when we were
met
back
Mr.
in Baghdad
Al-Hakim
in December.
Baghdad, in December.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think the if Da'wah's cohesion is not projected soon, then others will take the initiative. And Sayyid Ammar Hakim would be the key
Yes.
candidate to take the initiative, not a kingmaker, but more facilitator.
Exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
key theme. However, I personally still, in the current picture, I project a more national unity Shia alliance collectively, because I don't see a zero-sum game. I see a non-zero-sum game moving forward. Not a win-win. I don't see it even that. I don't see it in a sense that everybody think that they got what they want. On the contrary, nobody will get what they want.
Well, let me ask.
So compromise is the key theme moving forward.
Which
So
is what politics is about.
it is. So the problem here that we have is how ambitious is Sayyid Muqtada al-Sadr in relation to the premiership. If he is content and he says, okay, I will strengthen my ministries, foundation, provinces in the upcoming provisional election we will have in the later year, and I will aim for the premiership in 2022. That might be the long view of him.
That might be the long game for him also.
Yes.
Yeah,
Let me
which
ask
is a
about
smart long game.
the geopolitics of this.
Yes.
Because he's young.
He's very young and
Because
he can
he's
wait.
young.
He can wait and he can develop
So
the
we
base
do
even
have
more.
the old game, old guard versus new guard. in that
Yes,
sense.
yes.
Geopolitics. I wanted to ask. Obviously, Iran backed some maybe lists and was not happy with others. The U.S. is trying to understand what its interests are in all of this. Mr. Sadr had met with the Saudis, so at least there's a relationship there. We haven't said much about maybe what Turkey was feeling
And the
during
US.
these elections. Yeah, the U.S. So what are your quick views? We don't have much time left. Ambassador Faily, the geopolitics of it. How's Iran
I think
feeling? U.S.?
one good sign is the referendums, the agendas and the manifestos of the parties was all centralist. And hence I don't see a polar
And nationalist.
a nationalist-ish. But hence I don't see, because we're yet to define what nationalism is in the Iraqi context.
That's a very good
So
point.
I think I would rather not use that
Yeah.
term. Centralist would be. So hence I don't see anybody, any geopolitical partner, projecting a person who's polarizing as for the premiership. I don't see it that way, because they will lose more and people may be happy with status quo in one way, and therefore Prime Minister Abadi has a good chance in that sense. So that's the way I view it moving forward. I'm yet to find U.S. engagement in Iraq moving forward as a clear strategy. What do they want post the nuclear, and where does the Iraqi points comes in? Is Iraq a checkpoint Charlie moving forward?
Interesting.
If that's the current paradigm, then we'll have clear rule of engagement in it.
Randa, last words for you. Geopolitics.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the Iran's play in this. I mean, Sadr has made his position known in terms of opposing factions that have been backed by Iran. Mr. Vilayati, the advisor to Mr. Khamenei, has been quoted to have said in the past, we will not allow liberal and leftist and communists to rule in Iraq. So it's going to be interesting to see, how they're going to play this. My bet is that there will be a convergence of interest again between the US and Iran around having Prime Minister al-Abadi as being a compromise candidate.
Thank you very much. I want to end sort of where you started, Ambassador Faily, to indicate how nice it is that, one is talking about an election and to have ink-stained fingers rather than blood-stained,
Yes.
and to have major decisions of politics and government and policy be decided by the people, even if, things are not perfect and so on. And to see that happening in Iraq repeatedly now is very satisfactory. When I look around the region, Tunisia finally has made it into that. Lebanon just had elections. None of them are perfect elections. But in a few countries in the Arab world, there's some track record. And Iraq is a central country for the Middle East entirely. And we hope that the democratic experience, with all of its ups and downs, is taking root, we hope, in Iraq. And thank you, Ambassador Faily, for being with us today. I know you have a very busy schedule. And thank you, Randa, for being with us as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Here. And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. This is an issue which certainly in the terms of formation of government will be with us for many weeks, or some weeks at least, which we'll be covering in the weeks ahead. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Middle East Institute. To support MEI's programs and podcasts, please donate at www.mei.edu. Thank you for your support.